Hey, welcome to the Glen Gauer podcast, the best podcast you'll listen to all day. Sponsored by Mission Blueprint. All right, should we get started?
And why not?
Welcome, Russ, to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
You're Mr. Russ Bortnem, and you're from?
Lake Campbell area, south of Volga.
South of Volga, South Dakota. I work with men. I have a men's conference that I do every year. By the way, one's coming up on January 7th, 2023, right here in Brookings. And I think men are the key to a healthy culture, a healthy church. Good men are the key. So I want to go tap your brain a little bit, if you don't mind, and ask you the question. If we can go back,
it won't take you long.
If we can go back to the 1950s, would you say you grew up in the 40s and 50s?
Yes.
Yeah. If we can go back to that era, growing up, particularly when you're in your teens, what were men like back then? And how do you compare men back then to today's men?
A lot of similarities, of course, I think. But I don't know. It seemed like the men ruled back then, whether it be the family or the church or the school board. The whole era back then, and a lot of men do now during these times. But everybody says that they don't. In a lot of families, you can see it. The men don't rule at all. And a little bit in my family. I don't rule the roost as some of the men back when I was growing up.
So what do you mean by rule more? Do you mean, as they say, rule with an iron fist in the way they approach different things, or
decision making?
Gotcha.
I think whether it be financial or what the family's going to do, where do you go on vacation, or if you go on vacation. Back in the 50s, we didn't have any money, and I knew that the neighbors didn't have any more than we had. So very little vacation. Vacation was going to see relatives on a nice Sunday afternoon. Yeah.
That's right. That's the way it was for me. I had one vacation in 18 years. We went after a harvest to a Twins game in the Twin Cities and came back home.
That was a real trip.
Oh, that was a big deal. Oh, yes, that was a fun trip. Do you think men have lost a sense of masculinity over the years?
Yes. And I wonder if it isn't the media, TV and movies and things like that have decayed what the men think they should be, what they should do.
Yeah, you watch shows like, what were some of the shows growing up that you watched and compared to today? What were some of the shows growing up?
Oh, what is it? Father Knows Best, and all those good shows. I can't think of them now. But yeah, you don't see any like that.
My Three Sons
type. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that type of TV shows, and also in the movies. Growing up, my sister and I would go to the afternoon matinee on Saturday. Well, my folks, they took the eggs and cream in, and with that money, they bought groceries. And so that, while we went to the movies. Yeah.
So there has been a denigration of masculinity, I think particularly in the media, and you saw that too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So let's go back in time. I'm really interested in your childhood. You've been on this planet for 80 some years now, and you've seen a lot in your lifetime, a lot of change, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah.
What was it like growing up in the 1940s and 1950s?
Well, like I said, I knew we didn't have much money, but nobody else did either. And went to country school, and we did our chores and worked on the farm. I was fortunate enough to. We moved back when I was 8 years old. My parents had married here in the Volga area, and then went to California. And then 10 years later, after the war, 1946, we moved back and started farming again.
And where was the family farm?
Near Lake Campbell.
Okay.
Yeah.
South of me, about 20 miles, 15 miles or so.
Yeah.
And what did you plant on the farm? What were the crops? And did you have milk cows as well?
We had a few milk cows and hogs and chickens. And we grew corn and small grains, oats and barley. And then along come the soybeans, sort of a cash crop too. And flax, they had some flax grown, which is a cash crop.
Sure.
Yeah.
Were many farmers planting corn back then?
Oh, yes, everybody planted corn.
Okay, corn was pretty big.
Yeah, yeah.
So, World War II, you must have been 7 years old, 8 years old by the end of the war. What do you remember of World War II?
Not that much. We lived in California, and I remember that they knock on the door a couple nights, and it was somebody in charge of checking for lights. And so we had to pull the curtains over because the light was shining out in the street. And, they walked around and made sure that everybody had a dark house.
Why was that?
For this in California, in case the Japanese came in and wanted to find the city. And they could see the city by the group of lights, I would guess.
No kidding.
And they also found out that my dad worked at Lockheed Aircraft Company in Burbank. And they had camouflage over the whole factory. And they found that a lot of the Japanese were growing flowers, but a lot of the flowers were planted in arrows that pointed to the factory.
Wow.
A lot of things like that, and that's why they rounded all the Japanese up and put them in camps. And we had one probably 5-10 miles from us.
No, I didn't know this. How many camps do you think there were in California?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there was a lot of pluses and minuses to all that too.
Sure.
But somebody made the decision and we got to do it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then my dad had a Model A pickup, and he painted it silver, and on the hood it was a V, a big V, and right above it was the Morse code for V. And I forget what it is, but that's what he drove, a victory.
And so that's how they would communicate. From above sometimes. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that was for navigation and, I don't know, some of the communications with in Morse code.
Very interesting. Yeah. So why were you in California?
That's where a lot of the family had gone. Both my father and mother to get jobs from the 30s. And so in 1936, they got married and went out to California. My dad said they went out there on their honeymoon and then ran out of money, so he had to get a job, and he stayed for 10 years.
when did you meet your wife?
Out in California. I was stationed out there in San Francisco area, and she was out there. She's Canadian, and she and 3 others moved out there to start their nursing. They were going to work their way around the world and spend a couple years in each area and then move on. And they all got married in California.
No kidding.
They didn't make it to Australia. That was the next place.
No kidding. That's really great. So then you joined the military.
I was in the military at that time.
Oh, okay. So you, what branch did you join?
Navy, yeah.
Why the Navy and not the Army or the Marines or the Air Force, Coast Guard?
I wanted to fly, and so I went to. First off, I thought the pilots were all superhuman and supermen and all that. And one of the guys in the year ahead of me in high school went in to the pilot training in the Air Force. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I know I can do it.
Right.
He wasn't dumb, but and so I thought I was just as smart as he was.
Sure.
So I went to talk to the Air Force recruiter, and he said, we're just taking navigators now, no pilots. I said, well, I want to be a pilot. So right next door is the Navy recruiter. And he's sure. And we have a program to where 2 years of college, you can get into flight school. So that's what I did.
So you joined flight school about what year?
I went in 59, January of 59.
And was there a war going on at that time?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you missed Korea by quite a ways.
After Korea.
And what about Vietnam? Did you see any flying time in Vietnam?
No, I didn't. My naval career, I did not shoot at anybody, and I didn't get shot at. So, but during that time, I went back to instructing in the airplane that I was checked out in, and instructed for 3 years, and then got out and went with the airlines.
Okay. What was the first plane you flew?
It was in Brookings, a Ronca Champ. I had 15 hours before I went in the Navy, 15 hours of flight time.
Was that a mandate or recommendation?
No.
You thought you better have some kind of skills.
Yeah,
before
it was available, so I did. Yeah.
All right. So, how many years did you spend in the military?
About 9. I was in the National Guard in Sioux Falls during college, 2 years of college. So after that, then I went Navy.
Then you went, and you were Navy 9 total years?
9.
9 total years.
Yeah.
All right. So what's very interesting about you is the Naval or the Navy Fighter Weapons School. And you were a part of that, correct?
That's when I was instructing. I did 2 cruises on a carrier over to the Pacific. And then when the Navy rotates you sea duty and then shore duty. And so sea duty is aboard the ship and that type thing when you're flying. And then you go back to, like I did, training of some sort, or back to the flight training, even back in Pensacola, or to a Naval Air Station as some duty there. But I was lucky enough to go back and join the F-8 training squadron.
So did you actually fly F-8s?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah. That's the one I was checked out in, yeah.
Oh, okay. How about the F-14? Did you ever fly that?
No, that was after I got out.
I thought it was probably too late, but did you ever get to go in the back seat of an F-14?
No.
No. That's too bad.
Yeah.
So tell me about this Navy Fighter Weapons School. I say it slowly because there's a nickname for that, correct?
Yes.
And the nickname is?
Top Gun.
That's right. And you had something to do with the beginnings of Top Gun, correct?
Yes. There was about half a dozen of us instructing there, and we one of the guys was the leader of it, and we each took a part of the training. It was called fighter weapons school. I'm sure it was fighter weapons school, and but we'd invite just like Top Gun, like in the movies. They'd invite pilots from different squadrons, and we'd also invite the Marines down from El Toro, and they were flying the F-8. So they would go through the school, and we'd go through all phases of weapons delivery and combat air training and dogfights and missiles and everything like that. I was in charge of the Sidewinder missile, and you do the ground school, and then you'd also go up and fire at a drone. So we did all that.
So let's talk about the dogfighting that took place, and we're talking late 60s, early 70s?
Mid-60s.
Mid-60s.
Yeah.
So what year did the Top Gun school start?
Probably about 64.
Oh, I didn't know. I was thinking it was later than
65.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1964, you started with F-8s?
Yes.
And then...
No, I was checked out in F-8s and did my cruises in F-8s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for the Top Gun school, they all started with F-8s, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah, and so when they competed, because was there a competition in the Top Gun school or not? Because you watch the movie Top Gun, came out in 1985 with, of course, Tom Cruise. And by the way, have you ever met Tom Cruise?
No.
Thank goodness, right?
No.
And in that movie, they portrayed as who's going to be the Top Gun, who's going to be, the main guy, and they had a trophy and they had points. And did you do any of that in 1965?
That's all movie.
It's all made up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you did training, what did that look like?
Well, you just there'd probably be 4 airplanes. Maybe you start one-on-one first flight or so, but then there'd be 4 airplanes and then sometimes more, so that you get a big group and coordinate, and you would fly out to some area that is strictly for military training, over the Salton Sea or out over the ocean, something like that. And you'd go 2-on-2. You split the 2 guys one direction and then turn back in. And when you crossed again, the battle is on. And you try to get around. And we had, we called it gun camera film. It didn't work too good, but you try to bring that back and prove your point that you won. You shot them down, but the argument is always there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Nowadays they have telemetering equipment and everything on the ground that they can look at, and you know right who won and who didn't. Yeah.
Very interesting. Did you ever mix with any of the early NASA astronauts?
No.
Never did?
No. But one of them was an F-8 pilot that went up to the moon. He was one of the guys that stayed in the whatever it was that orbited around the moon, and the other 2 went down and landed on the moon.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah. Doesn't come to me right now.
Okay.
But he happened to be the one that, he's staying up there for a few hours, I think. And he felt, they said he could take a nap and everything, but they couldn't wake him up. Oh, wow. They tried all different kinds of things to wake him up.
Was there that much anxiety or stress in his line of work? Is that why?
Well, maybe he, leading up to the whole operation, he was, I'm sure, stressed, and he just relaxed and was going to take a little nap. and he was so tired they couldn't wake him up.
Oh my
But
goodness.
of course they did finally.
So what was the top speed of an F8?
That was one thing everybody was proud of. We got 1,000-mile-an-hour pins, and about the third or fourth flight, you went supersonic, which is more than 1,000 miles an hour. So that was great. Yeah, it was one of the first airplanes to do that.
And that didn't scare you at all?
No,
Really?
that's what you. It was a thrill. When you're flying and you go supersonic, it everything is behind you. All the noise, it just gets quiet, and the airplane is very sensitive to control inputs. And one of the things we would do as instructors, we would brief. Now look in your mirrors. The mirrors didn't show too much, but it would show the wingtips. And you'd go into a turn and put a little G on, and you could look in the mirror and see the flex of the wing. The wing would move. You can't have it rigid, otherwise you'd flex until it broke off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did know that the wings actually do have to have some movement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Huh. Any accidents up in the air? Go ahead.
It was a single engine airplane, or single cockpit and single engine. But your first flight is solo. There's no instructor riding with you at all.
Why is that?
That's the way it was built. A lot of airplanes are built that way.
Interesting.
Yeah. And later on, the F4 and the F-14 and all those had somebody riding with you. Yeah.
Huh.
So that was interesting.
So what do you think the fastest you've ever been in a plane? What was the top speed?
Probably about 1.7 Mach. And I don't know what the miles per hour that would be. But that was on we did Zoom climbs, see how high we could go. And our commanding officer was Forrest Peterson. And he was the only Navy pilot in the X-15 program, where they dropped them off, the X-15 off of a B-52, I think it was. And then they'd light their rockets and see how fast they could go or how high they could go from that. And he had the speed record of, I think it was about Mach 3. And he said any paint on the outside of the airplane would just peel off, just burn off.
No kidding.
Yeah, going that fast. Yeah, so he had everybody. We had the pressure suits, full pressure suits, just like the astronauts do. And we would go up and see how high we could go. And you make a speed run. That's when I was 1.7. And then make a zoom climb to see how high we could go in the F-8. And I went to 69,500. And what a difference it is when you get up that high. Above you is just black. There's no blue up there at all. And you could see the curvature of the earth. And then you'd glide back down and land at Miramar there, usually with pretty low fuel.
Yeah, I wonder about that too, but that had to be a little scary way up there, huh?
Apprehensive, yeah. I don't know about scary.
Okay.
Yeah. You made sure you were doing what you were briefed to do.
No kidding. Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah. It was a great achievement. And all the pilots in the squadron did it. Some went higher, some went lower. All depends upon how you made your pull-up. Make a 2G pull-up to 45 degrees, and then when you get to, I think it's 200 knots, then you start pushing over, and you balloon up, and you're not controlled. It's going wherever you happen to point it and back down.
What was your greatest feat in the military?
The guy that was in charge of the fighter weapons school got orders and moved on to a squadron, and then I became officer in charge of the fighter weapons school for a year and a half until I decided to get out of the Navy and go with the airlines. So that was neat.
Wow, I didn't know you were the Top Gun boss.
Yeah, for a little while.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And how many guys did you have under you? Let me rephrase that question. How many pilots were you training at a time?
Oh, we probably had maybe 10, 8, 10 at a time. Because we had a lot of flights. We would go over to Yuma, Arizona, and have air-to-air gunnery, which is they tow a target, and then it's just a flapping, we called it a rag, but you'd make passes and shoot at it with colored bullets. The ground crew would color the bullets, and then the holes, you'd try to see if it was orange or blue or whatever.
Oh, I see.
Because there was at least four guys on each target.
Yeah.
So and then you get down there and then you argue if that was a red one or an orange one.
I'm sure none of the men were competitive.
No, not at all.
Yeah, exactly. Huh. That's really awesome. That would have been fun to watch.
Oh, well, and enjoyable. Just loving it, every bit of it.
What part of the military do you miss the most?
The guys.
Yeah.
The guys, yeah. The training squadron was for people pilots who had gone to shore duty and were doing something other than flying. And then they got assigned to a squadron, and on their way to the squadron, they would come to get checked out and trained on the F-8 again. And so most everybody during Vietnam, they got shot down or captured, we knew because we had trained them. Mm. So that was bad, sad that they got shot down, and not everybody shot down was killed, but a lot of captured. We knew all of those guys in the F-8 that had been captured. I'm very fortunate to get that assignment. I think somehow I was chosen to do that. I don't know. I wasn't anything special in the first squadron where it made cruises and stuff.
Yeah, there's a theme here that's kind of developing in my mind, and lots of people don't do a thing because of fear or because of perception. And earlier on, you were talking about a gentleman who decided to go into the Air Force, and you said, well, if he can do it, I could surely do it. And I just wonder how many men or women sort of hide behind this misperception about themselves as if they can't do it. And here you are thinking, well, if this guy can do it, I can surely do it. And you became the Top Gun boss for a couple years, or almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm. That relates, I think, to somebody going in for maybe even a major surgery. Well, others have done it, so why worry? Leave it up to God. It'll be okay. It'll be God's way, whether it's okay or not for your results. But a lot of things that way too. Others have done it, and you can do it too.
Yeah, this brings us into faith, because you clearly have faith. I can see that even as you're talking. And it seems to me, and I might be wrong on this, but it seems to me that the the older generation has a lot more faith than the younger generation. Would you agree with that?
Don't really know.
Okay.
You know, boy, a lot of people have faith nowadays too. They're doing things that we never thought of doing.
Like what? What do you?
As far as military, the airplanes they fly, and what they're capable of doing with them. It's so much computers and everything that I know very, very little about.
Do you think the men in the Navy that you were hanging out with, was their faith in God pretty active, generally speaking?
Probably half and half. You know, some showed it and some didn't. And maybe the ones that don't show it, you don't know.
You don't know.
Only God knows.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I remember in basic training, on Sundays, we had a 2-hour window where we could go to our church service almost every Sunday. There were some Sundays they wouldn't let us go. We were out doing other things.
Doing something.
Oh, yeah. And almost everybody took that opportunity. And then some of us began talking about faith after we saw each other, because I'm a Catholic, and so I went to the Catholic Mass and then identified, oh, you guys are all Catholics. And so then we would talk about Catholic things. And I remember talking to a guy in Denver about going to Mass where he grew up, and we had a nice conversation. I wonder if faith is still as big of a deal in the military today as it was when you were growing up, or even 30 years ago when I was in the military. I don't know if there's a way to know that or not, but it seems to me faith has diminished quite a bit in this country. Do you agree with that? Do you think faith has diminished in this country?
I think so. But again, we don't know.
Yeah.
But yes, in the initial part of flight training, we all marched over in Protestant services, and every Sunday. Yeah, I was the flag, carried the flag, and in front of all everybody marching over there. And then on graduation, this is kind of funny. During graduation, of course, they all line up, and the graduating squadron would get their diploma. And the guy carrying the flag, U.S. flag, was out in front of all the group. And when you started, you were back probably 100 yards from that guy behind a little shack they had out there. And you'd watch him, and of course, some guys lock their knees and pass out. Mm-hmm. And so your job was to get there. If you see him wobbling, you run as hard as you can so that flag never touches the ground. Never had to do it, but...
It never touched the ground, did it?
No. I never had to rescue somebody.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that was unique that they had somebody just in case.
So where is our country headed? You have seen a lot of politics in your life, way more than I have. And how do you think politics have changed over the years?
Well, I think politics has been up and down ever since my childhood, and didn't follow it at all. And in history, it's been up and down also, ever since George Washington. And he didn't have an easy time either, and with his politics and all those guys. But they dedicated their whole life and wealth to make it. And it's too bad we can't carry on and do that too. But only a small percentage are politicians, and a very small percentage are military. And where are the rest of the people?
Do you think America is still a Christian country?
Yes. Yes. Maybe a smaller percentage. They used to say, a few years ago, that 78% were Christian, but only a small percentage of them went to church. I don't know how they arrive at those figures or anything like that, but I think we're still Christian. Again, we don't really know. And I don't know how they come up with the figures. And you can't believe what you see or hear or read. Not all of it, anyway. And I think that's a big problem now. When I was growing up, we only had 3 channels, and that was the news was the main thing on there, and a few things like that. And the newspapers, you couldn't really, were they right or wrong? But nowadays, it seems like a big percentage, especially the younger people, get their news from the social media. And that's biased. I do anyway.
Why do you think it's biased?
Because that's what they want us to believe. They're directing our thoughts, and that's where they want the country to go, or you to go. Is not where I want to go.
I completely agree with you. I think there's a huge number of people that completely disagree with you and I on that. They're not even thinking about a narrative that they're pushing on us. They're thinking, well, this is just how it is. You guys are in la la land, but I see it the way you see it. There is an agenda, some kind of idea that they're trying to push upon people to move a certain direction. And I think we're finding out with the 2020 election and Facebook and the kind of the algorithms, the type of algorithms the CIA knew Facebook had, because they knew that they knew that Facebook and social media can change a certain percentage of people's minds just by how they word things.
Well, that's the only thing they read, or only thing they get their information from. They don't read any newspapers, which aren't always, or watch different channels on TV. We do that. We watch a lot of Fox, but we also watch a couple times a week the news from one of the other channels. Mm-hmm. And they never mention the border. That's one thing. Never. The only time they do that is when they drop off busloads of aliens up there in New York or someplace. Then they'll say they came from Texas. They don't say where. Mm-hmm. Colombia. Well, they might say a few countries like that. But
I want to ask you some questions about RVing as we conclude, because I think it could fit into what we've been talking about. Now, you know who Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is, of course.
Yes.
And I just watched a movie about his life. Did you see that movie about his life?
No.
Very interesting what he has gone through. A black man in the South, a Catholic guy.
Yeah.
You would never expect him to be a Catholic, but he was a Catholic, and the way he made his ranks to the Supreme Court, it's really quite a story. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll put a link so you can watch that movie. I think you might have to subscribe to one of these. Yeah. Excellent movie. But one of the things that I thought was so interesting is he had been working his whole life and he had not seen the country. And so either his wife or somebody said, you need to buy an RV and get into RVing. So he did. And he said he would go out and meet people. And if I remember right, as I'm watching the movie, he was surprised how, I can't remember how to say that. I don't know how to say this. But he loved meeting people. And he said 95% of the people he met had no clue who he was. And he never told them. He just met people and he loves, that's one of the things he looks forward to is RVing. So you spent 5 years RVing, didn't you?
Yes.
So
yes.
tell me about that. Tell me about the experience of RVing.
About 6 years maybe. And the last 5 or so was full time. And so would spend the winter months down in Texas with where our kids were, and then we'd make a loop in the summertime for 8-9 months. One year out to the east, and then the next year out to the west.
No kidding.
And just dearly loved it. My wife wanted to stay RVing until she had to go home, but.
You mean a nursing home?
Yeah.
Oh.
yeah. But, and it's true. One guy mentioned to me, he said, RVing, when you set up your RV and you sit outside with a drink or something outside your RV, you'll get visitors because people want to talk and meet you. And he said, all my time RVing, whether it's a $500,000 big motorhome or a pop-up camper, you never meet an SOB. That's how he put it.
Was that true?
And it's true.
No kidding.
You don't know their background. You don't know anything about them, but they're RVers. So you go over and talk. And on your vehicle, if you put the hood up, it means you must have trouble. So they come over to help. See what your trouble is. Maybe I can help you.
No kidding.
Yeah, really, really good. And we just loved it. And a great way to see the country.
So why'd you stop?
Well, I wanted to do something with living permanently someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're so happy we chose South Dakota back here again. I'm just a mile from where I grew up.
That's really
the
cool.
farm where I grew up.
Do you have any interesting stories or interesting people that you met during your RV years?
We the last 2 years we spent 2 months in the Olympic Peninsula out in Washington State. It's just across from Seattle. Beautiful area, and we enjoyed that. And then we spent 2 months on the coast of Maine up there, and we had a big, like a catalog of RV parks you could pick out. And so I picked this one out right on the coast of Maine, but it was $1,500 a month. Back then, back in probably 04. And so we went inland a little bit, and it was $400 a month. Big difference.
A little easier on your grocery bill.
So this is down by Kennebunkport and Sanford, I think it was. And so I go in and get a haircut, and here on the wall of the barber shop are all these Bush #1 pictures, and pictures of the barber and Bush #1. So we talked, and we had a good little visit about President Bush #1. And where we were, Sanford is where the presidential airplane would land. And then he'd go down to Bunkport. So I wrote a letter to Bush, and I said, I went twice to your barber up there in Maine, and I'm so happy and this and that. Just a short little, and I got a letter back from him.
No kidding.
And was it about 2 years ago? I tried to find it, and I can't find it. But it's in my mess somewhere. But I thought that was pretty unique.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Right on. So we have a hat here. Tell me about this hat.
The cadet, when we went through cadets, which is 2 years, as a cadet, we're something like the academies. They are cadets too, and they get commissioned when they complete their school. Well, when we got our wings, finished flight training, that's when we got our commission and wings. And it's about a 2-year deal. And so we've had reunions over the years. And this is one of the hats we had at one of the reunions. Naval Aviation Cadets, NAVCADs. And then the Marines had MARCADs, Marine Aviation Cadets. And this little symbol down here is the advanced wings. You didn't get the real Navy wings, but you got these little things that you had pinned on.
Who had the best pilots in the world?
Navy.
Russ, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yes.
Good to get to know you a bit more.
Yes, and you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Glen Gauer podcast, sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Mission Blueprint is a nonprofit ministry started by Glen and Jamie to sanctify the family. Our income is donation-based, and we need your help. Please support us financially by going to www.mission-blueprint.org and be a part of our financial team. Thank you, and may God strengthen the bars of your gate. That's it.
Okay.
Unless there's something else you want to talk about, I'm done.
No. I didn't know what I was getting into.
How was
it? It didn't hurt. I hurt it all.
Yeah, that's just usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Hey, what's the biggest technological advancement that you've seen in your lifetime?
Electricity.
Electricity?
You know, you can do without a CD player, but you try without electricity. And that's what I'm afraid of, that somebody like China can do. And they have the capability right now to shut down Minneapolis area. And you wait about 5-6 days. And okay, well, you give us this here, and we'll turn it back on for you. Or the whole East Coast. Not only gas, but banking. And you turn off electricity, we don't have backups anymore.
Yeah, what are we going to do if the grid goes down for just 2 days?
2 days.
And, people's
2 days.
Freezers melt, and their food spoils. And they can't get to a grocery store because they have no power. I remember when what was it called? The I'm sorry. When that wind came through?
Yeah, that big storm.
Yeah, you remember the big storm?
Yeah.
First of all, I'd never seen a storm like that in my life. Again, 52 years old, I haven't seen as much. Have you seen a storm like that? Never. Okay, so my neighbor's saying, oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, we've never seen anything like it. So the next day, I wanted to go into Brookings to see what was going on, because that wind came through late afternoon. That was a Friday, I believe. And all the power went off until 11:30 in Volga.
Yeah.
So roughly 6 hours of no power. And it was fun. Because you know what happened? All the neighbors came out and they started talking to one another.
Yeah.
And we were driving around and helping one another.
Yeah.
It was so fun. So the next day I went into Brookings because their power wasn't on until, I would think it was later that day. But
some areas, several days.
Yeah. So I went into Hy-Vee. Did you go into Hy-Vee the next day?
No.
It was crazy because they had backups. And so all the backup lights were on and it was fun. People are having so much fun shopping because you could, but the backlights on gave the whole room a different color, different ambiance.
Oh, okay.
And I felt like I was in some sort of end times. But I agree, electricity is a big deal. And if we went a week, I don't know what this country would do with a week without electricity.
Laura won't let me do it because it's so expensive. But I'm thinking about one of those automatic generators
Yeah.
and get, I don't know what size propane tank I have now, but get as big as they got. And that ought to last us quite a while.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about getting one of those kerosene heaters. Remember those when they came out in the 80s? They're about, that tall off the ground?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about just buying one of those and having some kerosene just in case if the power goes out. It'll heat up my upstairs, and that's all I need. The boys can move upstairs to sleep if we run out of power for a couple of days. But most people are not prepared.
No. I remember growing up that electricity would go off every time we had a storm, summer or winter. You know, a blizzard or a storm in the summertime, and sometimes for a couple days. And in the wintertime, the folks would put up a rug, a blanket over the
Yep.
kitchen door, and then turn the oven on. We had propane. You're not supposed to do, but that was the only heat. And then when we'd go to bed, we'd put our coats on, go up, and they had extra blankets for it. But you wake up and it's cold.
And quilts. They had more quilts back then.
Oh, yeah.
And they were nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we had a quilt. I grew up on a farm. My mom and dad had 13 kids. And all 6 boys stayed in the north room where there was very little to no insulation.
Yeah.
And we were laughing about that a couple of weekends ago. But my mom said, well, but the kitchen was right underneath. I mean, didn't the stove warm you up upstairs? I said, no. We could see our breath in that room, and that's how she grew up. She could see her breath, and she would even say that now and then when it snowed just the right way with the wind, snow would come into the house, underneath the...
Oh, yeah.
And so you probably remember outhouses.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, my uncle had one. And when I grew up, we had running water, but my uncle had an outhouse until about 1980. And so if I had to go to the bathroom, we went to the outhouse, and he finally got water into his trailer house.
Yeah.
But he didn't want. It just took him a long time. He didn't need it. He was fine without it. So, oh yeah, I remember some of that stuff. But electricity, I think, is the answer. What would we do without it right now?
Big, in manufacturing and everything. If we didn't have electricity, none of this would be done. Talking about drifting snow inside. We had the RV, and we stayed in it until the house was done. And one of the first things we put in was the water and a septic tank and all that because of the basement of the house. And then we run it up to, so I've got full hookups, water, sewage, and electricity up to this one place. So we parked, and they said, okay, it'll be September when the house is done. October, November, December. They couldn't get things even back then. And snowstorms. But the slide outs on the RV, the snow would come in and be drift about this deep and not melting. It was that cold we had the normal heater and electric heaters.
You're in a freezer.
A freezer.
You're like blocked in like a kind of freezer situation.
I kept thinking, this is a tin tent. What did those homesteaders do?
Oh, my.
In a wagon. Oh, my God.
We have no idea what suffering means. I mean, honestly, if you're born 1960 or later, maybe 1950 or later, we did not suffer like your age. Like my mom's age, 30s, 20s, and before. That was a whole nother program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you ever read that book, something about Earth? But it's about the, I think maybe Oldham area back in the 1870s or something like that. This guy was from, the author was from professor over in Northfield, Minnesota at what's that college? Lutheran College over there. But anyway, they had maybe a small sack of grain or corn or something like that, and that was seed for next year. But they were starving, and they would not grind it up. And and then they had to protect it from the mice and rats, and all winter long. Yeah.
What in the world did they eat to stay alive?
Yeah, I don't know. My dad talks about, and he showed me how to do it, taking straw from small grain, and maybe about that long, and you divided it in two and made a knot out of it. And that would burn a little bit longer than just the straw.
Oh, sure.
And they had 13 kids in his family. And he said that his mother used to have the kids push chairs around the table to keep warm, he said. But that was a game. Yeah. And then they had to reverse. Okay, go back the other way. And he said we wore the chairs down to the cross rung. and I told his sisters that many years ago. Oh, he did not do that. Oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But it makes a good story.
Yeah.
That'd be about that much that they wore down. You think the floor would have been worn in a circle too? Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
We can sit and talk.
Oh, it's fun stuff.